Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother Asar Imhotep with the Mandela Institute for the Advancement of Science and Culture, as well as the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology. Today is Sunday, November the 7th, 2021, and today I will be doing a brief lecture titled Becoming a Living Orisha. And I'll get into more details of what we mean by this concept. And we'll be discussing some of the highlights of two books primarily. The first book being my book, the latest one that has come out, Chiluba Maweja, Yoruba Orisha in Ancient Egyptian Ak, an exploratory etymological study. And the second one being the one from Dr. Chilemma-Mukinge, Muntu Zombie, Portrait of Human as God's Special Creation. And so all of that and more when we return in just a sec. Peace and blessings, and we are back. As I stated before, this is your brother Asar Imhotep, and I want to thank each and every one of you for joining this live conversation and listening and watching the slide presentation that I have for you today. And I think it is an important one, and it is a continuation of many discussions we've had on this program before, and it regards some of my latest research. So I'm very appreciative that you decided to share a part of your Sunday with your boy, and give a shout out to everyone who is live in the chat room. So peace and blessings to NAFTBC. Thank you for joining us. And Althea Lasha, thank you for joining us. Brother Infinite Minds in the building. Sunjata and Zombie is in the building. Vyasa Gullah is in the building. Kimoyo West Africa Spirit is in the building. Cat is in the building. Brother Dejed and Ankh Hekara is in the building. Everything is in the building. Darnisha C. Pickett is in the building. And those of you who are watching via Facebook, thank you for joining us. And we're going to have a good time today. So this may be a show that you want to take a few notes, and of course it's being recorded, so you can always come back and check the conversation. And so again, today's conversation is about becoming a living Orisha, and this topic came up as a result of some research that I'd have been involved in, and especially with the production of this text here, Muntu Zombie, by Dr. Chilemma-Mukinge, Portrait of Human as God's Special Creation, from African creation stories, religious beliefs, and cultural practices. And so, and I actually did a little commercial for it. So you'll see me play this, every now and then. So I'm just going to play it for you right now. So make sure that you get your copy. like that. I'll be uploading that on YouTube soon. So, if you like it, please share it and help spread the word about the text. But we had the author of that text, Dr. Chilemalema Mukinge, on the program recently, and he made a comment that he discusses in the text, and I'll cite from there a little later on. But I want y'all to kind of pay attention to what he says here, and then it is this conversation that leads to the formulating of today's program. So I'm just going to play a little clip, so hopefully y'all can hear it in its fullness.
The beginning, after creation, heaven, God and the spirits were living close to earth with humans. So there were interactions between the two. At some point, the humans did some things that the creator used. Okay, let me separate my residence from the earth. And then the relationship was modified. What happened was that the humans lost some of the extraordinary powers they had, but until today, there are still people who are born with talents, with gifts higher than the standard, than the standard. And some of the people use their extraordinary powers to destroy others. That's where you have the notion of sorcerer, for example, and witchcraft. And there are some others who use theirs to build lives. The dream interpreters are there. The healers are among those. So that's one important aspect of spirituality. African spirituality also is manifest in the fact that the human being can become possessed by the spirit through trance or consecration. Most African peoples practice initiation. Initiation is allows one to ascend to the status of spirit, especially people in a particular position, particular status, like rulers, like kings. So when they are being consecrated, they incorporate the spirit and become, in a sense, equals of the spirits, so that using the power of the spirits, they can protect the country better, their population better.
I hope y'all were able to catch the nuances of what he was talking about. And so he was stating that, there was in a lot of African creation stories, there was a time when heaven and earth were closer together. That means the human population had greater access to the spirit world and things, but something went awry and there was a separation. And so when that separation happened, the gifts that were readily available to all mankind were no longer available to all mankind. However, there was not a total sever of the quote unquote spiritual world and the diurnal world in which we live in today. And there are certain individuals who are gifted to have access to that that world and the gifts that it possesses. And so as a result of those extraordinary powers, so to speak, that are either gifted or bestowed to certain human beings, they have reached the level in terms of status of the spirits. And so it is that conversation that that is very nuanced, and that a lot of discussions aren't had when it comes to this aspect of African spirituality, which we call kimoyo here, which we're trying to popularize that term. And so in the kimoyo tradition, the African spiritual tradition that we see, there is this notion that one can be elevated to the status of spirit, that one becomes a spirit. And so when people think of spirit and spirituality, they're often thinking of some extraordinary superhuman entities out beyond our normal experience, and not understanding that you have living persons, human beings, who are spirits. And not in the sense that, you know, everyone has a spirit. And so we'll get into that a little later. But it's an extraordinary kind of spirit. And so this is something that, you know, of course, when I edited this book, you know, I came across, and, you know, I almost forgot about that aspect of it, you know, until Dr. McKinge mentioned it in the text. And so, you know, it is because of some questions that arose in this text that inspired this particular text. This is the latest text that just came out this weekend. Chiluba Maweja Yoruba Orisha, an ancient Egyptian Ak, which I also have a little commercial for it. So I guess I'll play that now. So I hope y'all like that commercial as well. But, you know, the gist of this text here is when Dr. Mukingi had mentioned the word Maweja Nangila, which is, you know, a name, one of the names of God amongst the Baluba people of the Democratic Republic of Congo. He defined the word Nangila, which is a common word. It means love, and to be loved, or to bestow love. But he didn't define the word Maweja. And when I was looking for the word so that we can define it and put it in the text, I couldn't find a definition for it. Every single resource that I saw simply defined the text as God. And so that is what sparked the research on the etymology, and to come up with the etymology so that we can include it in the text. It took a little bit longer, and so we didn't really get to put it in the text. But maybe we can, you know, say, update it and add that in there. But as a result, which was, you know, not expected, the word Maweja ended up being a dialectical variation of the word in the Yoruba language known as Orisha. And also in the ancient Egyptian, as how we pronounce it in our Egyptology speak as the word Ak. And so here's the glyph for that term. And so in many respects, we should really pronounce Ak, Orisha or Rishe. And so, it was this wasn't expected. And so there were aspects of this that reinforced many of the concepts and things that were discussed in this text. And so we'll see how that, plays out in just a moment. And so let me shout out some folks that I didn't get to shout out. So peace and blessings, Sister Tamika. Thank you. Sister Julanda Zachary is in the building. Brother Conan Lee, Imperial Nubia, is in the building. And I saw Brother Black Panther in the building, Mossy Warrior Clan. And let me see. I shouted out everything is there. Brother Ali is in the building, Dawood L. And if I missed anyone, I do apologize. So thank you all, for joining. And what did Brother Vyasa say over here, secretly making Super Bowl ads? You got dang right. It's time to step up the level, when it comes to advertising, Black scholarship. So, hopefully, that brings it to another level. So peace and blessings. Stephen McKenzie, Hotep, and Marion Allen, peace and blessings to you, all the way out in Mississippi. Thank you for joining us. And of course, Brother Conan Lee over there in the UK showing love. So just want to thank each and every one of y'all. Brother Uwa Abantum, number 2, is in the building. Thank you for joining us. And Sister Anusha, H-Town, in the building. Thank you for joining us. Much love and respect to you. And so, without further ado, I am going to start our conversation. So, hopefully this won't take, over an hour. And peace and blessings, Brother Muhammad, all the way out in Kampala. Peace and blessings. Thank you for joining. And so, now that we got a few folks in, we can have the discussion. So I am going to share my screen, and let's do it like that. And so hopefully y'all can see everything. So what I'm going to do is go all the way back to the first slide. Well, I guess I can just do that. So let me know that y'all can see everything. Let me hide that. And I can get rid of that because this isn't lesson 2. It's actually lesson 1. Okay, so let's go back. All righty, so let's get it in. So today's discussion, as I mentioned earlier, is Becoming a Living Orisha, highlights from Imhotep 2021. And again, this book, Chiluba Maweja, you can find this at maduandelapress.com. It's about $20 for the text. And, it goes into a lot more than what I'm going into tonight. So let's get it in. And of course, if you want to support this channel, you can do so by joining the Patreon page. That is patreon.com/Asar Imhotep. So let's get it in. So this is, as I mentioned before, a continuation of our conversations about Kimoyo. and Kimoyo being the name we have given African spirituality, and it comes from the Kikongo language, and it was introduced to me by the late Dr. Kimbwadende Kiabonseki Fukiao in a number of his texts. And so when I saw it, I'm like, this perfectly describes African spirituality in general. And so, you know, these are two graphical representations. I have lessons on these on the Patreon page. So they're exclusive to the Patreon members. And so, you know, check that out when you can. And so we have roughly defined Kimoyo as the art of adding life to life, of vitality and prosperity, the art of making things to flourish in all areas of life. And the word, you know, moyo itself is a word for heart. And the word moyo, as it is pronounced in the Kikongo language, is in Chiluba, moyo, with the M is rounded with the labial W, moyo. And so but they have essentially the same meanings. And so it means it's for the literal heart, but it also means life. It also means mind, soul, spirit, courage, will, desire, inclination, sense, mood, thought, salvation. And it is also used as a greeting. And an equivalent concept in the ancient Egyptian language is the ib or yib, which means heart, mind, understanding, intelligence, will, desire, mood, wish, think, believe, feel, fancy, and perceive. And I have bolded and highlighted in the red these words or these meanings of mind, thought, soul, spirit, and intelligence, because this is going to be very important to our discussion. So I have, for example, another series of terms in the Chiluba language that reinforce this concept. So there's another word for spirit in Chiluba, Luankanyi, and this word means spirit, intelligence, and judgment. A variant of that word is nginye, intelligence and spirit, and with the abstract prefix bunginye, which means logic. And the reason why this is important is because, you know, you have individuals thinking that spirit is simply some kind of ethereal being that floats around in the universe, not understanding that spirit is also a thought. It is a framework. It is a way of thinking. It has to deal with one's level of intelligence. And as you can see, the word for intelligence and the word for spirit is also a word for logic. And so for some reason, there are a lot of people going around thinking that to be spiritual, you have to suspend logic and intelligence. And that's not what you find in these African languages. That the word for spirit is the word for thought, for the mind, intelligence, and logic. This will become very important. So remember, I said you're going to have to take notes, because we'll revisit this again a little later. So, you know, in the Sesotho language and in Southern Africa, you know, you have, you know, various words for spirit like Lelopo, spirit, witch doctor. But, you know, we see a variation of our word moyo, which is moya in Sesotho, which means air, wind, breath, and spirit. But with a certain prefix, it means mentally and also spirit. So it's just reinforcing that this word moyo has to deal with not only spirit, life, and vitality, but also intelligence, mind, thought. So when we say kimoyo, kimoyo also has to deal with the art or the way or the manner of thinking. In modern anthropological and academic terms, we would say an epistemological framework in which someone thinks. And so kimoyo is more than just what we would traditionally think of spirituality. And so when people think about being spiritual, they're going to have to include being logical, being intelligent. And so we'll delve into that a little later. So as I mentioned at the beginning of our program, I played a little clip from Dr. Mukinge, who talks about the human beings rising to the level of spirit, that spirit is a status, is a state. And this is especially amongst, kings in African societies. And so when you read in the literature, for example, of quote unquote divine kingship, we're going to get into what divine kingship is. So if those of you who have my text, Nesubiti, King in Ancient Egyptian, you know that, I reintroduce this concept of the king being a living ancestor. And so this conversation builds on that 2016 work in Nesubiti. And so it's going to reinforce in a different way this notion of divine kingship and what that means. So we know that in general, that as Professor James Small would always say, that we are spirit having a human experience. And then you'll see some folks say that, spirit is inside of us. And so this notion of spirit dwelling in us is very ancient in African wisdom traditions. So this is just an example of that notion. So this is from the tomb of Pahari, who was a scribe and a mayor in the city of Nekheb. And in this tomb, he says, the deceased says the following: "My good character raised me high. I was summoned as one who is free from what is hateful. If I were placed on the scales of judgment, I would come out complete, whole, and sound. I came and went with the same heart." That means I was born and I died with the same heart. "I did not lie to another." That means I was honest. He says, "I knew the nature which is in people." I knew the God that was in people. "Knowing him, I knew this from that. I did the task as they were ordered. I did not confuse the message with the messenger." A lot of us in the conscious community have a problem with that, but that's another topic for another day. "I did not speak with vulgar words." Means he wasn't going around cussing out everybody. I haven't gotten to that level of spirituality. I still have a few more people to cuss out before I just totally get on board. So I did not speak with vulgar words. I did not converse with people who lacked character. Like, if you lacked character, we can't even be in conversation with each other. I was a model of kindliness, one praised who came praised from the womb. The mayor of Nekheb, Pahari, the justified, born of the lady Kam, the justified. And so you can see this in Dr. Malana Karenga's text, Ma'at, pages 84 and 85. So, when we're talking about the divine here, there's a nature in everyone. Everyone is a nature, but we're not talking about this type of spirit in terms of the animating body that allows for us to move about or whatnot. This is something, what we're talking about here is something different, even though, as I discussed in the text, the word nature is also a dialectical variation of the word Orisha. And so we won't be doing much. I think I have one slide with some linguistic work. So this is not a linguistic lesson. So, all that details is in the book, which you can get. But as I mentioned earlier, the concept of, ranking to a status is a special kind of spirit, that is of high rank and of power. And so Dr. Mukwege states in his text, this is on page 30, and then the other citations on page 34. He says, human beings are given opportunities to ascend into spiritual states while on earth. Mediums through trance, seers by revelation, ordination into priesthood, and consecration to certain high-ranking social statuses are the most known forms of spiritualization. So we're everyone comes with a spirit, but there's a state or a level of spiritual existence that at different points of time one can ascend to. So there are those who become spirit or is possessed by spirit, and then there are those who are ordained and become spirit. Their status is of that of a spirit, of a non-human spirit. And so this is what he means here by ordination into the priesthood, or the consecration of a high-ranking social status. So it's a status, it's a class. So you have a class of human beings in these traditional societies that are spirits. And so he continues on page 34 to give an example in terms of the journey to consecration. He says, the Luba culture values legitimate marriage and marriage stability, wealth achieved through personal hard work, and winning the race for the chieftaincy. In each case, if the ancestors are pleased with the accomplishments, they will call the achiever to seek spiritual anointing, consecration from an authorized, established achiever in the same domain. So pay attention to the words he's using here in terms of being an achiever, somebody who has achieved greatly in their life. Those who have done something, who have lived and is living and walking in their purpose. What he's saying here is that the ancestors will, if they are pleased with this person's actions, they will be called to be consecrated because of their achievements. So now it continues, talking about the person here, a community builder, as a husband and a father, for example, of many healthy children, and a contributor to significant growth of the extended family, he will be called to be consecrated as an accomplished achiever of wealth. See, I had this conversation earlier this year about a high value man and how in traditional African wisdom, or in traditional African societies, being a wealthy person, being a person of high value was exactly what the goal was. And so we're going to see here that this continues and reinforces that discussion. And so everybody want to be mad at Kevin Samuels for popularizing the term a high value man, and everybody wants to rally against it. And if you are within the traditions, this is something that you can't rally against, because this is exactly what African folks were talking about. So I'm going to re-emphasize here. He says, a community builder. Talking about, because we were talking about achievement. So people who are community builders, a husband and a father of many healthy children, and a contributor to the significant growth of the extended family. He would be called to be consecrated as an accomplished achiever of wealth. Remember, in African societies, many children is seen as wealth. Children are wealth. And so the name for that is Mukola. And this is cognate with the word nature. So a person who is an achiever of great wealth and great accomplishments, somebody who extends the family and community, somebody who is a community builder, is called a nature. In the ancient Egyptian language, the cognate for it in Chiluba is Mukola. Another variation of that word is Inkole, Inkola. If you have Aluja Volume 2, you will know this, and this is reinforced in Chiluba Maweja Yoruba Orisha. So you achieve your way into the status of a nature. Continue. A peer of past achievers. So you become part of a brotherhood of past achievers, of great men, of great community builders, of great wealth creators, living and dead, procuring many wives for self and relatives. So not only do you have wives for yourself, you help put together relationships and help other families build wealth. For self and relatives was the most praised accomplishment, qualifying one to run for the chieftaincy. So after you've done all this, you've proven yourself in the community, now you are qualified to be a chief in the community. The race was a long and costly process. See, people think that, when people run for president and run for mayor, that and all that money and it costs to run and get the approval of the society, that this is something kind of new. It comes with capitalism. And no, that's part of the process. This is why you had to prove that you can be that you can generate wealth, because this is your job as a chief. This is your job as a king. And so if you've proven that you can raise money, now you qualify to be able to run for the office of chieftaincy. Doesn't automatically mean you get it. But as it states here, the race was a long and costly process. The candidate had to satisfy incumbent chiefs and power giver dignitaries' immeasurable appetite for riches. So even then, it cost to be the boss. Finally, victorious of this long and costly competition for the chiefdom throne, he was invested chief in Fumu, in Kume. In Egyptian, this word is Hem, His Majesty, King, and Chief. And so, continue, investiture into chieftaincy. The investiture ceremonies included several acts of concentration, elevating the incoming chief to a spiritual status. Altogether, investiture rituals are believed to turn the incoming chief into the peer of the spirits of past leaders and them his partners in the governance of the chiefdom. And so a society can have many chiefs. But you have a spiritual, when you become chief, when they talk about divine, when he becomes a god, this is what they're talking about here. You become a living ancestor. It's a status, it's a class, it's a secret society of known achievers and past achievers. Just kind of like how Black Panther, he once he ascended to the throne as king, and he drunk the heart-shaped herb, and he had to be buried, and then he went into the ancestral realm and saw all the past Black Panthers. He was consecrated. He became spirit at that moment. That's why that's why you have death rituals in initiations in Africa, because it's symbolic of you dying and arising in a spiritual. Now you're rising as a spirit. You become a living spirit in the society, and we'll get into exactly what a spirit is. African culture is deep. Excuse me as I squig on my Topo Chico twist and lime water for a second. How y'all doing out there, y'all? Y'all with me still in the land out there? Let me see. Green side, sinking with the music in the ass. Alrighty, I'll get to more of that later. Just making sure that y'all can still hear and that we are good. So let me get back to the conversation. So hopefully y'all know how I do it. I like to build, on the concepts. And so in the Yoruba tradition, the king, they reference human beings in many ways as, able to become Orishas. Not only when you die, but also living. So your mother is an Orisha. And so, and these sources here, you can find them in the text that I just released. So, if you have the text, just go to the bibliography and you'll know what text I cited these from. But, we have this phrase, Orisha be Iakosi. There is no Orisha like mother. That word Iya is the word for mother. There's no Orisha like mother. Your mother is a Orisha because she is a creator. And so we'll get into that a little bit more. But also there's the phrase Iniyan ni di Orisha. It is human beings who become Orisha. And so I think in this context, they're talking about after death, but I think this can be applied to the living as well in terms of that second phrase. But it's human beings. Your Orishas are people. And so you have ancestral Orisha, people who have been deified into the state of Orisha. You have living Orisha, and then you have the more universal and non-ancestral forces and spirits that are also called Orisha. And so, let me not get ahead of myself. So when we continue, when it comes to this concept of the notion, for example, that a king, rises to the status of a Netcher, of a Mukola, of a Inkola, because Inkola also means a eminent and powerful man. And that the word Netcher means power, powerful and wealthy and erudite and educated person. So, but this also applies to priest. And so one of the words for priest in the Igbo language is dibia. And this is a term that is widespread across the continent. And, there's a text called After God is Dibia by Dr. John Ume that was released in 1997. Now, that phrase, that title comes from this full title here, Chukwu Welu Olu Dibia. And Chukwu is the word for God in the Igbo language. And it literally means after God, Dibia, meaning the priest, comes next. So when we look at the social hierarchy, we have God, then Dibia, the priest. Now, the Igbo people, they don't have kings. So the highest up in the status is the Dibia, the priest. But in the Yoruba tradition, the Oba, the king, is the chief priest of all the priests. And so they have a similar phrase, but it's worded a little differently. And so, the Oba, the king, is Ikeji Orisha, second only to the Orisha. The second citation, and that's in Oduyoye's text. What's the title of that dang text? Words and Meaning in Yoruba Religion, Linguistic Connections in Yoruba, Ancient Egyptian, and Semitic, which came out in 1996. And so there's another book by Barnes on Ogun. And when she's talking about Ogun and the relationship between Ogun and kingship, states that when the king is crowned, the chiefs affirm it in their salutation to the king, Oba Alashe Ikeji Orisha. The king's power is like that of the gods. And so, but it goes into a little bit more detail. This is the book here, Africa's Ogun, Old World and New. And I state, and so I'm copying from a text that I wrote there. We are informed that the word Orisha is, and now I'm quoting the text, Orisha is employed as a simile for the power of the king. Ikeji may also be translated as next to or second to, suggesting that the king's power is not simply like, but is of the same substance or nature as that of the gods, although of diminished order. So the word Ikeji, next to or second to, and meaning that and so you can interpret that Ikeji Orisha, meaning next to the Orishas, that he's of the status of the gods, that he is a god. And so I'm just reinforcing this concept, backing up what Dr. Mukinge mentioned in Muntuwa and Zambi. And so, as I mentioned before, the words Orisha and the words nature or cognates, these are dialectical variations of the same word. And I don't have time to go into the details. Again, the details are in the new book. And so, but The Complete Gods and Goddesses of Ancient Egypt by Richard Wilkinson, he notes that by examining the word's use, the word nature in the Egyptian text, it is clear that it actually encompasses a far wider range of meanings than the English word God. The category nature could include deified humans, famous individuals, and from the 30th dynasty onward, those who drowned, as well as benevolent and malevolent spirits. So this word nature includes living people, people of high achievements. That's why it includes famous individuals. You become famous because of what you achieve. So now we're going back to Mukola, mentioned by Dr. Mukinge amongst the Chiluba. This is a cognate for the word nature. And so these are great achievers. When you are a great achiever and become a master at something, and which brings you fame and wealth, You have risen to the status of Netcher. And so we have to define this concept. And, you know, I've created and shown this slide in many discussions, but I have to reinforce this concept. And so another variation of the same word of Netcher, of Orisha, it doesn't look like it. This is why, you know, this is a separate conversation to demonstrate the sound changes and laws that have happened to give these variations of the same word. But Netcher in Orisha is cognate with the word won or wo in the Ga language. And Ga's related to tree, and these people live in Ghana. And so the cognates to the word Ga, to the word won or won in the Ga language is found in Middle Egyptian as Iwon, a god, epithet for Osiris. In the Yoruba language, Iwin, ancestors, ghost spirits. In the Ingas language, Won, ancestors, the living dead, shades. In the Bachama language, Won, the demigod in charge of the dead, the demigod in charge of the kingdom of death. And that's exactly who Osiris was. So you have Osiris in Nigeria just under his other epithet, Won, which is Iwin in Middle Egyptian. But in the text, Religion and Medicine of the God People, Dr. Field notes that a woe, this is how he spells it in the text, but this is the two variations of the same word, woe with the N and woe with the N dropped. A woe, by God definition, is anything that can work but not be seen, and includes the smaller beings of specialized and limited activity associated with medicines and magic. The key phrase here is anything that can work but not be seen. That is a woe. That is an Orisha. That is a Netcher. But those, because of their work, because of their achievements, rise to the class of woe, of Ewin, of Orisha, of Netcher, of Nkole, of Nkole. This is very important here because this is what we would call high value, because these people bring value to the community. They make the community strong. The word value means to strengthen something. You add power to something. And so these are what we would call high value people. Netchers, Mukola, Nkole, the Nkola, the Iwin, the Won, the Orishas, the Mawejas, the Lisas, the Lezas. And so, as I stated, I only have one slide that really goes into the details. So I wanted to show here that when in ancient Egyptian, where they have WN as the consonant sequence, it corresponds in Chiluba to KL. And in this instance, for the word to open is KN, because the final N is a process in linguistics called assimilation that force this L to become N. And then in this variation, when to exist to become essence, Bukati, when L is followed by I, it becomes, the L turns into D. But it comes from the word ikala, to be. And so this is the word for God, Nkole, Nkwele, God. Nkole, spirit's ghost. And it literally means God, and also an eminent and powerful person, an eminent and powerful man. And so bringing all this together, you can, when you review this, pause and, take notes. Again, I have that in the Maweja text, there. So among the Bakongo people, the equivalent concept is personified in this word nganga. So remember what the word wo means. It has to deal with anything that can work but not be seen. And as I discussed in the text that I released this weekend, the word Orisha, the word Weja, the word Ak, the word won derives from a root meaning to do, to be able to do, to work. And when that verb is nominalized, it becomes the word for power. And all power is the ability to do work. The synonym is energy. Energy is the ability to do work. And so, with that said, we see the continuation of this thought process. Even though this word, I don't believe, is cognate with all the others, it is still, it still holds the same semantics. So a priest, like we would call in the Yoruba tradition a babalawo, in the Igbo tradition of the Bia, among the Bakongo, amongst the Kikongo speakers, their priests, their medicine men, they're skilled and they're skilled individuals. They're highly wealthy and high achievers are called Nganga or Nganga, which essentially is a doer. And as Foucault tells us in African Cosmology of the Bantu Congo, he says, notice here, and he's giving a breakdown of the Kinga symbol amongst the Bakongo people. So he says, notice here that in traditional Congo society, to become a specialist was something required of all its members. Everybody was called to be Nganga, to be a specialist of something, and was an expression of professional requirement in social life. In Congo society, everyone is a free individual and a doer / specialist, which in Kikongo, Muna Congo, and Fumuna and Fuma Nganga. And Mukongo was accepted as such, therefore, as an Nganga in his community, if he only could be a doer of something for the well-being of the community. Kala Yisalu, to have a métier. So you become an Nganga because you are doing. So this is the equivalent to a Mukola, someone who achieved, somebody who not only achieve wealth for themselves, but also help others to achieve. This is what we mean by adding value. Value empowers. To bring value to something is to empower it. And so this is what we mean by being a high value man or woman or person. What is your level and ability to bring value to others? And because of your ability to do, you are a doer. You're not simply a talker. And we know in this conscious community, there's a whole bunch of people who love to talk about this, talk about that, but they are not doers. They are not Nganga. They are not Mukola. They are not Nature in Toro. They are not Won. They are not Iwin. Because you have to be able to do, to be able to achieve, to make things happen in the society. You are a mover and shaker of the society. And so one becomes these various titles through initiation. So what is initiation? How does one become initiated into this level of godhood, quote unquote? That's what we're getting into now. And so initiation is defined variously across different societies. And so I just have a few to kind of, so I can give you their definitions so we can kind of synthesize exactly what this means. And so for Dominic Zahan, in his text, The Religion, Spirituality, and Thought of Traditional Africa, a very good book to get if you can find it. He states on page 54, initiation in Africa must be viewed as a slow transformation of the individual as a progressive passage from exteriority to interiority, from the outside to the knowledge of self and the development of one's inner power. And we'll get into that a little later as well. It allows the human being to gain consciousness of his humanity. And so it's a process of not looking for external validation and external, sources to solve problems for you. That now you're looking within, seeing the power that you have within to be able to achieve the goals. Because remember what Pahare said at the beginning of our discussion, that he knew the nature that was in people. So what initiation, according to Dominic Zahan, is talking about here is essentially the initiate, the person being educated, going through the educational pedagogical process, discovers their inner nature and how to draw on that power to achieve great things in this life. And so the late Amadou Hapati Ba, when he's talking about initiation among the Fulani and the Bambara, in his text, Aspects of African Civilization, he says, the purpose of initiation is to give the psychological person a moral and mental power which conditions and aids the perfect and total realization of the individual. Worded in a different way, but essentially draws on the same thing. That is giving the, because the psyche is something in oneself. And so it's developing a power which conditions and aids the perfect and total realization of the individual, to bring you, to elevate you, to ascend you to the level of spirit. And of course, the great Dr. Malidoma Somé, in his text of Water and the Spirit, Ritual, Magic, and Initiation in the Life of an African Shaman. He states, as understood amongst the Dagara, that when a child grows into adolescent, he or she must be initiated into adulthood. A person who doesn't get initiated will remain an adolescent for the rest of their life. And this is frightening, dangerous, and an unnatural situation. After initiation, the elders will pick up a partner for the young person, someone who is selected by their ability to team up with you in the fulfillment of your life purpose. If one obediently walks their life path, they will become an elder somewhere in their late 40s or early 50s. Graduating to this new status, however, depends on one's good track record. Now, he gives a more formal definition of initiation, what we're going to get into later. I include this citation here because initiation has to deal with, on one level, developing into a productive man or woman in the society. It is the process in which people become adults in the society. And so we have to keep that in mind. Your maturity depends upon your knowledge and your initiation into the values and the ways of your ancestors. And so, as I've mentioned in other conversations, I have been privy to a number of Dr. Foucault's unreleased texts. And there's this one text called Bulwa Meso. And hold on one second. Bulwa Meso. And it has not been released, of course. And, you know, the holders of the text are working on some legalities to get this book published in the near future. But for research purposes, I have been, given permission to view them. And there is, a lot of stuff that hasn't been released in terms of ideas and concepts, written by Foucault. And so, in Bulwa Meso is really a text about initiation. And so we're going to continue our conversation on the development of an Nganga. So we know the level and what the status of an Nganga is, someone who does and achieves on behalf of the community. But there is a particular process that they go through and some other little nuances that we're going to get into now from that particular text. So Bulwa Meso and initiation. So he states in the text, we will be dealing here with his own terminology. He said some other stuff before then, but it sounds like it's kind of jumping in the middle conversation, but bear with me. So we will be dealing here with his own terminology, Ganda or Vanda, a term that cannot be translated into Western language without losing its weight or undermining its real meaning. Ganda is a very scary word, especially for anyone who is fairly familiar with the Kikongo language. It is a fearful word for the simple reason that it requires for the candidate to be not only modest and humble, but totally submissive to the society of Kienganga and its noble cause for the community. It is scary and fearful, Mushanda, to be initiated, and this is what that word Ganda for the most part has to means in terms of being initiated, because Ganda is to have one's eyes open, a process esoterically known as Bulwa Meso. That's what the word Bulwa, the phrase Bulwa Meso means, or it's open, and without the bu prefix is wa, meaning to open. Bulwa Meso, eyes. So it's plural, meaning eyes. So known as Bulwa Meso in the specialized language of the Ba Nganga, the priesthood of the Nganga. It is to be given the power to see what others do not and will not see unless they agree to follow the path of the sun, Landa Nzila and Tangu, through initiation. And so I have a whole lecture on Landa Nzila and Tangu, and it's currently for the Patreon members. And, this is what we deal with in terms of Kimoyo and the Kimoyo symbol. But, that's another discussion for another time. But we continue. It was and still is fearful to Ganda, therefore, to be initiated, because Ganda is to be exposed before the total experience of the highest knowledge of key principles of life and living accumulated so far by the human experience inside a given society. To be exposed to such knowledge of key principles of life and living is to be given the power and the license of access to the most powerful and the most dangerous medicines and weapons on earth. It is to be given the key to lock and unlock Kangaye Cthulhu, all doors in and around us. It is to learn how to walk proudly and wisely, frontwards, backwards, leftwards, rightwards, upwards, downwards, and more importantly, innerwards, to be you and what you are intended to be for yourself and for the community. Here again, we're talking about the process of initiation and turning inward. So just like, who was that? Zahan and others talking about coming from exteriority into interiority. Fukuyama was saying the same thing in just coming from the Bakongo wisdom tradition. And so, continuing, he says, to ready oneself for initiation is to accept one's social responsibilities, of which leading the community, the society, and the nation is one of the highest goals to be reached by any initiated individual. Ascending Kukanga is to accept to be seated on the community stool. This implies that one is not only being given an office in the community, but being limited to enjoy certain routines, such as going away with community consent, going in the bush for a long time. You are bound to stay in the community surroundings, not only to watch for it, Kangila, but to serve its interests. Be there to provide first care to its members in case of accidents, snake bites, deaths, or other, and I put in there things, issues, etc. It is to be made Simbi Kiavata, literally holder of the village community. And this is what I have here bolded. Why? The initiation process essentially here is you become a physically living spirit that stands always present inside the community to provide help. It is, of course, scary and fearful to occupy such a position inside the community. So again, like with all the other sources that we share, when you become initiated, you are initiated into the level or the status of spirit. Initiation transforms you into a spirit being. That's what initiation is. So when I talk about becoming an Orisha, that's what initiation does to you. You start thinking like a spirit. But remember what I said earlier. Spirit, the word for spirit is also the same word for thought, consciousness, awareness, logic, mentality. And we can add in our language critical thinking. And you become the personification of thought, critical thinking, logic, because you're using all of that to help the community to thrive. So in reality, I can argue that initiation calls for you to be a scientist, a specialist and an expert in something, and an achiever, a builder of wealth in all its many dimensions, not just simply monetary. In other words, initiation is what, and your development of skills is the path you walk to become a high value man in an African society. And a high value man is what we call Mukola. It literally means an eminent or powerful person, a netcher in womb. Anybody who does and puts in work. And so we continue here with this idea of someone having clear sight, having insight and wisdom. And so in Aluja, I don't even know where my copy is. In Aluja Volume 2, this text here, for those who haven't seen, in Aluja Volume 2, I have a chapter in here on the etymology of the word Seba in the ancient Egyptian language. And I discovered that it essentially means a clear-sighted one. And a equivalent concept in the Yoruba language is the word Olaju, which they use to mean a civilized person. But it literally means the one whose eyes have been opened. Remember what the meaning of Bulwa Meso is. You have open eyes. That's what initiates an initiate. And a Seba is an initiate and also a teacher. This is a person with open eyes. And so in the Yoruba language, they would call that person an Olaju, he or the one whose eyes have been opened, who sees with the eyes of spirit, who has eyes open not only in this world, but in the spiritual world. And so there's several different phrases which goes along with that in the ancient Egyptian language, like, weba or weber, her, to be clear-sighted. And then when it has the W singular masculine suffix on weba or webaru, her, it means a specialist. This is conceptually cognate with an inganga, who's a specialist, a clear-sighted one. Win her, to open the face, to open the sight of be skilled, clear vision, public appearance, open face. And with the causative prefix S, it means to instruct, meaning literally to cause one to open eyes, to give open eyes. In other words, to give sight into reality. And so now we get into essentially what initiation is amongst the Daguerre. So we revisit the Of Water and the Spirit text by Dr. Malidoma Patrice Somé. And he says traditional education, therefore initiation, or Ganda in the Kikongo language, consists of 3 parts. And I have bolded here, enlargement of one's ability to see. This notion of being able to see is critical to one's development. Destabilization of the body's habit of being bound to one plane of being, and the ability to voyage transdimensionally and return. Enlarging one's vision and abilities has nothing supernatural about it. Rather, it is natural to be a part of nature and to participate in a wider understanding of reality. So now, this is essentially the definition of a Seba or Sebau in the ancient Egyptian. And this comes from the text of Antef from the 12th dynasty. And it says a Seba essentially is one whose heart is informed about the things which would be otherwise ignored. The one who is clear-sighted when he is deep into a problem. The one who is moderate in his actions, who penetrates ancient writings, who is sensible enough to unravel complications, who is really wise, who instructed his own heart, who stays awake at night as he looks for the right path, who surpasses what he accomplished yesterday, who is wiser than a sage, who brought himself into wisdom, who asks for advice and sees to it that he is asked for advice. This is someone who we know has been initiated, They have the tools. Their eyes are open. They are clear-sighted. They have vision. So I hope, that the synthesizing, that, me bringing out these sources, showing these commonalities in conceptualization of initiation and what an initiated person is and what it means to be to ascend to the level of spirit, to the status of spirit in traditional African societies. This is the whole purpose of what we do here. And so, hold on just one sec. There we go. And so, in After God is Dibia, the text I mentioned earlier by Dr. John Ume, Igbo Cosmology, Divination, and Sacred Science in Nigeria, Volume 1. And I'm still looking for that Volume 2, Brother Black Panther, Mosi Warrior Clan. I'm going to need you to take a picture of all the pages and make a PDF and send it to me. I'm just saying. Hook your boy up. Anyway, so in this text, he says something rather profound. And so this is why I said that why it's important to also understand the other aspect of what a spirit is, besides the agent that can do work, but the word for spirit also being the word for mind, intelligence, and logic of critical thinking, right? On page 30, he says, that is the reason for the ancient Igbo instruction. I'll say, Niegba Anya Niodu. Pay attention with an open mind, totally devoid of prejudices, by looking at the tail of the kite. So in many respects, it's telling you to have a scientific mind, to be open-minded, and to be totally devoid of prejudices. In other words, to be objective. See, people keep thinking that objective is some white boy stuff. And every time you want to have a conversation about being objective, they want to say that's anti-African. Everyone who says that don't know jack about Africa, ain't read nothing about Africa. And if they did read something about Africa, they skipped over these critical texts. And so we continue. In fact, this ancient Igbo instruction literally means see the tail of the kite with the eye. And seeing anything with the eye in Igbo is to behold or to see something with love. For example, when an Igbo person tells you, Afula minginanya, literally meaning that I see you, on, at, or with I. It means I love you. In other words, I see you with love. One must therefore set aside one's personal prejudices or bias. Prejudiced people see only what fits those prejudices. Ife onye acho kaofu. What everyone is looking for is what one sees, is an ancient mystic maxim which also expresses and illustrates this fact. And so, to be a Dibia, one has to think objectively, to think critically, to see with love, to see with an open heart and an open mind, to let the evidence speak for itself. So this is what I mean, that initiation is calling for you to be scientists, to think like a scientist, to think critically, to think intelligently. And I have to have these conversations because I always, in conversation, run across those who think that for some reason to be spiritual, you have to abandon logic, that linear thinking is somehow antithetical to spirituality, which is far from the case. To truly be spiritual requires you to think critically and requires you to be objective, because spirit is objective. That's why you have to be initiated to the level of spirit to be king, because you cannot rule a nation, you cannot rule a people with biased thoughts. You have to think like a spirit, and a spirit is objective. And those are all the makings of a good scientist, one who is not prejudiced. Notice the phrase here, Ife Onyeisiala.Asar. What everyone is looking for is what one sees. One must therefore set aside one's personal prejudices or bias. This is required to do good scholarship. So these ideas of objectivity, of removing bias and prejudice, are not European concepts. These are indigenous ideas embedded in our pedagogical systems, in our initiatic systems. I'll continue. And so, as Professor James Smalls would always say, that spirituality is reality. And as I've said in other conversations, spirituality has to deal with the procurement of food, clothing, and shelter. And I also add, in terms of the protection and expansion of family and the community at large. And so we're going to have a different conversation about spirituality, about Kimoyo, because people are all over the place thinking that lighting some candles, leaving some food out for the ancestors, this is what makes you spirit. You wear some dashikis and you got your elekes, and you go to the ocean and you swim in the ocean. You become one with nature and you hug the lions and the hyenas, and you get a boa constrictor and you wear it around your neck, and you wear some bones and you put some face paint on, and this makes you spiritual and more spiritual than other persons, and you just let the spirit use you, and you just abandon all critical thinking and let your biases, and you just lead and make decisions with your emotions and all this. And this is what being spiritual is. BS. So I always make sure I have sources, so I don't have I'm not biased when I come to these conclusions. And so, as I've stated before in another lecture on spirituality, is the quality of one's relationship to spirit. Therefore, the quality of one's relationship to the creation and protection of food, clothing, shelter, and family. So remember what we cited earlier, that when somebody is an achiever, they are ones who develop and accumulate wealth, not only for themselves, but for others. They're using their skill sets that they've developed, and they're using their ability to critically think to build community. They're community builders and sustainers. And so when they're tapping into the forces of nature, they all have the same goal in mind: to accumulate wealth, to maintain food, clothing, shelter, and good human relationships. Because when we don't have food, clothing, and shelter, society goes into chaos. That's why so much rested on the character of the king, because he was in charge. He was the central resource manager of the society. And if he's not able to bring food, clothing, and shelter, the society falls into chaos, because now the good human relations is on the verge of being broken. This is when you have what we have in many of the urban communities in America, where a lot of Black people reside, because of their inability to secure food, clothing, and shelter in a sustainable way, they start eating each other, metaphorically speaking here. And so this is what brings about crime and murder and violence in the communities. When everybody is eating, when everybody has access to clothing and shelter, and everybody's family's intact, the society is intact. And so the ability to be able to think and be level-headed as a leader in the community is because and the ability to make sure that the society has everyone has equal access to food, clothing, and shelter is a matter of national security. And so it goes a little deeper than simply having a relationship with the ancestors and lighting some candles in the background and getting you some sage so you can ward off the evil spirits of your co-workers at the office because they looked at you funny by the water cooler. And so, as I sum up, a living Orisha is one who followed the path of the sun, therefore is initiated, educated in the ways of accumulating wealth, strengthening relationships, and the art of vitality, dealing with health, is one who becomes a of high value and knows the art of making things and people more valuable. A living Orisha adds value power to the community and is a doer and not a talker, is the living action generating principle of his society. And so, you know, in the text, I talk about what is a living or the action generating principle. That's what essentially in a spirit or an Orisha is in terms of the ability to do work. It is the living action generating principle in the universe. And so I've had other discussions on, you know, what it means to be of value. And so I created this wheel of value. And so this is supposed to represent the cycle of life and the type of value that we will have throughout our lifetime. And so, you know, at the bottom, I have intrinsic value. This is the value that you are born with as a fact of living and being a part of this infinite cosmos. That's the value, the nature that Pahari, at the beginning of our conversation, talked about that he saw in people. He saw their intrinsic value. I saw and recognized the nature in people. That's the intrinsic value of people, the intrinsic power. So everyone is born with a divine aspect of themselves. You are divine because you are part of the divine. So remember our previous discussions that God is everything and all things at once. You have value because God is the ultimate value. You are a spark of the living sun, which is God. Right? You're a ray of light from that emanates from and into and a part of that infinite system which we call God. So now, so you're born with value. You're not, it's not like in the Abrahamic traditions, or more specifically the Christian tradition and the Judaic tradition, where you are born in sin. And so you are born in the Christian and Judaic tradition already with less value, and you got to earn your basic intrinsic value, you know, by adopting the religion of the Jews. That's not the case in Africa. You're already born with value. You're born valuable. And so, but there is more value to be gained. And so we have what we now call accumulated value. And your accumulated value is based upon the skills that you learn throughout life in your education. So the more skills, the more you're able to do in a society, the more valuable you become. the more problems or the more efficient and the more powerful way that you can solve problems, the more valuable you are, because people will give you money to solve their problems. And this is where the whole role of integrity and character comes in. Then we have in V3 social communal values. This is the collective, the societal values. So not only do you accumulate value as an individual, and of course you have intrinsic value, but when the society maximizes the potential of each of its members, the society as a whole becomes valuable. And now it can interact as a whole in the world because of its collective ability to manage resources or solve societal and human problems. So you become part of that. So, and then lastly, you have self-defined value. What is the value that you think that you bring to the society? What is it beyond your education that you bring to the society? And so all of this is the what I consider the African American value wheel that I created. And so, but this is part of this larger discussion of becoming a living Orisha, what I call becoming a living Orisha. And as I said before, you know, this notion of being a high value man, I've come up with these 10 ways, you know, earlier in the year, in terms of being an African centered high value man. And so the first thing is having good character and integrity. The second is being initiated into the ways and values of one's ancestors. Next is one who understands his purpose in life and walks his path. Number 4, has a world African historical consciousness and is well learned. So we're back into that education part again. 5, knows the art of unveiling life's mysteries, a problem solver. Mentioned that before. Belongs to a network of other high value men. And so we read earlier that, you know, once someone becomes a living Orisha or a Mukola, they exist in a class, in a state with other high value members. So when Kevin Samuels mentions this in his list of being a high value man, that is African. That is the expectation. Like other people of high value, other living Orishas, other living ancestors recognize you as such and accept you into the fold. Other Nganga accept you as Nganga. Number 7 is afraid to die without winning a victory for African people. Next, has mastered the art of accumulating resources to achieve higher goals. That's where the wealth building comes in. Mastered the art of being able to tower over life's 1001 of its challenges. And so be able to take a licking and keep on ticking. Knows how to recognize and celebrate life's beauties. Therefore, is not a stiff, has style, has fun, and looks at the positive in things. You know, and so the person has personality, is personable, and just isn't, you know, out for work, money, and things of that nature. So these are my 10 basic criteria for being a high value man, aka a living Orisha, you know, in the society. And that is the end of my presentation. And I will stop the sharing and remove that from the page there. And I haven't been able to check with the chat. So let me see. Let's So there's a lot of comments, so I have to go back up. But you know, y'all tell me what you think. And you know, make sure that, you know, before you go, that you that's right. Hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed as of yet, I would really appreciate if you subscribe to the channel. Make sure that you share and keep the conversation going. And again, if you want to, you know, go deeper into what we talked about today, I recommend these two texts. The first one being Muntu Wa Nzambi by Dr. Chilemalema Mukinge, and the one that I just released this weekend, Chiluba Maweja, Yoruba Orisha, and Ancient Egyptian Ak. I'll just put that one up there. An exploratory etymological study. And so we'll have some more conversations about some other themes in this text. And one of the themes that I discuss is how the word Nefer or Nefer, which is a title for Osiris, is also the cognate for the word Iwapele or Iwakpele, because it's really Kpele. But most people don't pronounce the KP in the P, they just pronounce the P in Iwapele. And so that's in the appendix of this text here. So before we go, I'm going to take about 5 at the most 10 minutes to kind of go and see what y'all have been talking about here. Let me just go up and see what y'all been talking about, because I know y'all act crazy in the chats. And let me see what it says here. Moyo is also ball or coiled something in Spanish. I have to look into that word. It says, Mama Niece as greetings, Brother Asar, syncing with the music in the ad. Sounds like the Korah. What is that? Thanks for the topic. You talk about the instrument. I forgot the name of the instrument that is used in the that text. And let me see. If y'all have any questions, you know, type it in the chat. And so when I scroll down, that'll give me enough time to recognize. And so peace to born eternal Lord Allah. Thank you for joining. And then we need Jesus. Peace to you. And Brother Robert Rand in the building. And Brother Robert Rand, he looks just like the Nubian statue on the cover of Aluja Volume 2. And it's funny because every single time I would upload an image to Facebook, the face recognition would always type or always tag Brother Robert Rand, because he looks like that Nubian statue. So we know where your ancestors came from, Brother Rand. Imperial Nubia asks, is the word spelled netter or netur or netter? It's not clear how it was pronounced, at least in the Old Kingdom and Middle Egyptian. So we can't say. We just say netter or netcher as Egyptology speak. But in other languages, you know, there's various different pronunciations. Like when you go to the Tree language, they say ntoro. Same thing in Toro, in the Sango and Zande languages. And but in Collagen, it's like intoro, and I want to say in Tala is one variation in Chiluba, but in Chiluba it's Mukulu, or in Kole, in Kwele. And it seems like there was an O in the majority of the variations of the forms that I've seen in terms of intoro or in Cole and things of that nature. But we don't know how it was pronounced, or we don't know exactly what the vowels were. We know in Coptic there was like there was like a OU, because you say nute in Coptic, but as far as Middle Kingdom and Old Egyptian, we don't know how it was pronounced, so we wouldn't know how to spell it outside of its consonantal skeleton. And peace to Akoma the Jed. Thank you for joining us. And of course, Black Panther Mosi Warrior. Mentioned him already. And let me see. There we go. Thank you. Brother Chavez in the building. Resending your text in the morning. And he says, this is the key concept behind the word Isheshe. I think the word Isheshe comes from a word meaning to work. And so I don't know if that's what you mean, but let me see. Brother Aziz Fall in the building. Peace and blessings to you. He says, still listening. Asar, thank you for joining again. Let me see. Some people view circumcision as the first initiation. Let me see. It says, problem is most of our ways are in Western schools of thought. Indeed. But this is why we have these conversations. And for those of us who are in the diaspora, if at all possible, we encourage dialogues. And if you can travel to Africa and, be a part of these particular traditions, to do so, to ask them, critical questions and to study these African wisdom traditions so that, you can counter and have a different mind frame or develop a different mind frame while existing in this Western construct. Let me see. Sister Nusha says, deep, I don't know what part of the conversation you're replying to, but I appreciate it. Heavy Mental Killer Priest, which was one of my favorite. It's still one of my favorite albums, ever. And of course I was mad hype when I was a Hebrew Israelite, because he's a Hebrew Israelite. But outside of me graduating from that level of consciousness, Killer Priest's heavy mental is just one of the hallmarks of the art of hip hop culture. It says, anyone in the chat initiated? So I know a few people in the chat who are initiated. Let me see, how do I spell this? Ilabila Cheo. Says, I was just about to type, I am Sukuma from Tanzania. Our God's name is Seba, and an ancestor is called Nitur. See? These, that's something I'm going to have to jot down and investigate. He says, I am in Sukuma. And peace and blessings. Thank you for joining the program and adding and for this contribution and this reinforcement here. I appreciate it greatly. And let me see. Nice. We'll see what tradition. Ogun, Ifa, and Egungun. They have their own conversation there. It says, I've never heard of Sukuma. Let me see. It's all talk. You either are initiated and have been given the mysteries or not. It's too much. And this is what I want to dispel about the so-called mysteries. There are quote unquote mysteries, but initiation is not about that. And what we're calling initiation is simply the educational path, the educational trajectory of any society. And so, whether it's about deep mysteries or not, it's about having a relationship and understanding nature and being able to use nature and the wisdom of nature to solve your problems. That's what you're being initiated to. What's this? Niacin in Senegal. I don't even know what y'all talking about there. Let's see, we're clear, if done properly, run disease will stop. Black Panther said he'll never give up. I don't even know what he's talking about. Also, he says, Albo Simba means teacher in Kisukuma. Yes, and there's various, that word is all across the Bantu spectrum as being a teacher, but also a student, also a wise person, also a doctor, also an engineer. It's used also as a word for expert across the Bantu language family. Let me see. It says, what is speaking on is correct. No, it's not white boy. It says, no, it's not white boy stuff. And that has to be a response to the logic and things. Give me that Patreon, and I'll see you. I'll scan you the book. See, the problem is I can't give anyone the Patreon. They set it up to where you can't hook people up, and so it's been a problem for me. So you have to go through Patreon because Patreon want their coins because of course they get a percentage of each of the pledges that you get. He said, if you're initiated, you can bear witness facts. This is excellent. Come on with it, Onyeisiala.Asar. I'd like to see you show the origin of EFI and geomancy. Talk to him. Keep it simple. The highest form. The learning curve. Welcome to the program. Thank you for joining. It says the highest form of spirituality takes care of the material needs of the people. To be spiritual is to serve. Exactly. You summed it up better than I could. Thank you for that contribution. Let's see. May I ask where? It says, may I ask why are we using spiritual? Because that's the word we use in English. And so for those of us who speak English, that's just the construct we're under. A king is merely a slave of great responsibilities, but the man who handles his responsibility is labeled a great king. Indeed. It says, when I was doing community organizing, that's how they would bring you in. Like, you better have a personal interest or you won't make it. Let me see. Reduces individual. Let me see. It said, like, socialist brothers. It said, master class. Said, no, give us that. I love my people ish. And of course, you can support the channel. Thank you, Sister Tamika, via Cash App. And I see someone has made a contribution. I haven't gotten down there yet to see who it was. It says, Brother Sean says, I'm asking seriously because I've seen a sister with a candle on her head calling it spiritual. I've seen another person use a picture of the rap artist with the braids and people out front. Yeah, that's something that I'm not saying it's not part of the spiritual process, because we got to remember that some rituals are designed not necessarily to achieve some manipulation of the forces of nature or anything to that nature, but more so to reinforce values, to reinforce and shape a certain type of thinking. And so, the lighting of candles, the giving of food to ancestors, the giving of offerings in a river or whatnot, the wearing of certain clothing in terms of discipline, the festivals, these all have a certain purpose, and these are all part of the spiritual process. So we also got to think of the mental health aspect of ritual and spirituality. And a lot of what we're, that's part of the spiritual process is simply designed for humans to be better connected to each other, and for us to be better connected to our ancestors. Because when you are better connected and you value your ancestors, you value the society as a whole. You'll fight to protect it. But if you don't feel like you're a part of that, you're not part of the legacy of the community, you will you will do things to undermine it. And so we saw that play out fictionally in the Black Panther film with Killmonger. And so, so these are the kinds of ideas. So I'm not totally against, certain artwork and the carving and pouring oil. All that serves a purpose. But ultimately, it's just as I forgot who it was said earlier, the point of everything is to have a more harmonious society and to secure food, clothing, shelter, and harmonious human relations with each other. Let me see. Says Brown, exactly. People are asking for a sissy, petty, water cooler spirituality, not a nation building principle. That hoodoo stuff. Sorry to say it. Indeed. And as I mentioned, I don't know if you were here at the beginning of the conversation, but the idea of community and nation building is part of the spiritual process, and that is somebody who has arisen to the level of spirit, to Orisha, or whatever the equivalent word is. It is because of their ability. In the citation I use, they use Mukola, but this is a person who has proven to be a community builder, a nation builder, and or a nation sustainer if one is already built, of course. But this person adds wealth to the society. He empowers he helps other people get the bag, so to speak. So, that is a part of the spiritual process, and people want to kind of curve around that. Let me see. They having their own conversation. So I'm just going to skip down. He said, learning curve. I'd argue spirituality is more individualistic based on its origins and its fusion. It is individualistic. Spirituality is an individualistic thing. And matter of fact, I wish I think I have a PDF copy of it. But Malidoma Some says that spirituality is individual. And this is why I keep saying that religion, I don't think there's anything wrong with religion. Religion is the codes and ethics, the processes for maintaining good human relations within a society. That's what a religion is. That is communal. Spirituality is an individual thing. It's not. It is designed to develop the individual so that he or she can be of service to the community, but the process itself is individualistic. It's an individual thing. Religion is communal. Let me see. Peace A Smooth, thank you for joining the conversation and for watching and for your support. He says, Asar, you would make a great initiate for any house. I appreciate it. Thank you. He says, this is why I say you can't be spiritual by yourself. In many ways, well, you can't be anything because there's no such thing as an individual in African society. And so, I say that with great reserve. But no, you can't be spiritual without you, because your spirituality has to serve others. And so, unless you're just in a dark room, dancing to drums by yourself all day, every day. No, but thank you, sis. Good job, Asar. Thank you. Drop the funk flex bomb. Fire emojis. And Sister Tamika again with the support. So again, if you have not liked the video, please like the video and share. And this is a review. He said, this is a review. So I've been taught this information. Exactly. And it's the more and more I study, the more and more I keep finding things that reinforce these concepts. And so I add those sources to my bag of wisdom. And of course, I got to share it with the public. And, so we just finding new ways to establish and reaffirm these things, because sometimes we just need a reminder. And let me see, what's this? In Kisukuma, it's Nituru from Tanzania. It means ancestors. Exactly. Yep. Neter is a word for ancestor as well. It says, respect the time for supporting the short-lived by Africa Republic. He says, the way Asar broken down gives you an idea of why Greeks and others had to embrace the culture so deeply, and scientific culture. And thank you to Brother Conan Lee for your donation and your contribution. It is greatly appreciated. And, I just want to take this time to say that, I think next Sunday I will, be starting the official fundraising, videos and things of that nature for the trip to Kemet. And so I am part of a dynamic list of scholars who will be attending the Aket tours, returning to the Source tour in February of 2022. And so I think it is from the 18th or, something like that, like the 18th, 19th to the 28th of February. And one of those days is going to be a day-long conference. And speaking at this conference is going to be Professor James Small, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Anthony Browder, Dr. Solange Ashby. She's a nubologist and Egyptologist, the wife of Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Dr. Rosalind Jeffries, Dr. Wade Nobles, and his wife will be there, Brother Mfudishi Jehuti Mess, and Theophilo Binga will be there. So it's going to be a very interesting conference. And so, for those of you who have already put your deposits down, and intend on going, I will see you there in February. And while I am there, I will be taking footage. I'll be shooting for the documentary film Chiena Into that I've mentioned earlier. Let me do that so you can see Chiena Into, where I'll be showing the relationship between the ancient Egyptian and the Bantu and later the West Africans. And so this is going to be a visual representation, countering this notion that there is no relationship between ancient Kemet and West and Central Africa. And so, of course, we've been dispelling these myths in the text, but of course, everybody doesn't read, especially thick books like Aluja Volume 2. So what we're going to do is visualize, these concepts and put it in a dope documentary series. And so the first set of filming I'm going to be doing it simultaneously during the Aket tour. And so I will be I'm trying to raise at least $4,000 to $5,000 in a very short amount of time. So, any way that you can help. And again, I will be starting a show, and you'll see a couple of videos. I'm putting together a trailer this week, to articulate the needs and what we're trying to achieve. And so, we're going to take this to another level. So again, that is going to be, if you want to know more about the tour, go to akettours.com, akettours.com. And so I was in the film Hoppy. And so, matter of fact, all these individuals are in the film Hoppy. And our good brother Taki, produced this, and Sister Felicia, and Brother C out of Jersey. And, just a very dope film altogether. So Thank you, Brother Conan, for your contribution. All of that is, going straight to the film, to make the film happen. So thank you, Sister Jolanda, for your commentary. Thank you, Sherry Jones, for watching and for your commentary as well. And Brother Aziz Fall says, Wolof and Coral, beloved, cherished one, incubus spirit, toward deity spirit. Exactly. And I think Diop mentions that latter term as cognitive with nature as well. So initiating one's environment may be better than saying initiation into nature. People spookify and generalize the word nature. I mean, nature's nature. Let me see. I will write you an email, brother, to share more of my recent findings. Thank you for your work, and you're welcome. Hotep to you too as well. Thank you, Sister Tamika. Support the channel, and let me know if you received your book. I know I mailed your book, and just trying to make sure that everybody received their text. Soap, our student, teacher, admired one. Yep, kind of Seva, which does incorporate me from Aziz. It says Omoluabi Ekpe, London in the building. Thank you, all the way from London. Thank you for this powerful presentation. How important is it for us to learn the indigenous African language of the African culture that we aspire to immerse? I think it is very critical. I would try to learn as much as possible, and unless you really just kind of dedicate it, really hard and put, a number of years in it, you may not necessarily be fluid, but language is the carrier of culture. When you start to learn an indigenous African language, you begin to start thinking like the people. You start using the phraseology, and certain things start to make sense. And not only that, you open up communication with the native population, and y'all can build more on that. And so, we may not have the opportunity, for those of us who were born in the diaspora, without recent ties to Africa in terms of our individual lineages, but whatever society we choose to adopt, in terms of reorienting ourselves and re-Africanizing ourselves, I think it is important to learn as much as possible in terms of the language. So definitely, especially if you're in the E5 tradition, Yoruba language is accessible. There's many sources that you can use to learn the Yoruba language, and it'll help to put some things into perspective. Let me see. Let me see. Is the approach of Western psychologists and psychiatrists in the kin to the approach of our African spiritual systems? Which one is more effective or beneficial to us? Of course, I'm a be biased and say the African way, but it's not to say that the Western psychology is not of value. And so I don't want to ever say that it is not, because Western psychology has changed over the years, and so it's not the same as what it was 150 years ago. But that's because Western psychology has had to have dialogue with the rest of the world, and when the rest of the world saw the so-called universals of Western psychology, it challenged them in a major way, which forced them to reevaluate on a lot of concepts and things, and they've had to change in order to better serve and meet the needs of the society in the present time. Doesn't mean that it is 100%, all good. However, I look at what is beneficial, but I would have my foundation in the various African traditions, and to, you know, kind of supplement with certain Western psychological ideas. They don't have to necessarily be mutually exclusive. Just understand that there are fundamental differences, and that, you know, you always want to be grounded in your African traditions. So I said Shefford and Corey with the 2 dislikes. Let me see. Just a few more. Reed came in and said, say now to Niger, Congo, Zambezi, Senegambia rivers. You may be speaking to someone there. Excellent as always. And thank you, Mama Nee, for joining the conversation. Indeed, Brother Conan. And he says, I got here late, but can't wait to start at the beginning. Your scholarship is just impeccable. Do I appreciate you and thank you. And I look forward to your feedback. So it looks like I went through all the questions. If I missed anything, I do apologize. I was kind of rushing through these. And so just a little bit over 2 hours. And so I want to thank each and every one of y'all. Again, go to Madu Indela Press to get your copy of both Muntu and Zombie by Dr. Chilimamlima Mukinge, as well as my latest text, Chiluba Maweja, Yoruba, Orisha, and Ancient Egyptian Ak, an exploratory etymological study. This was released this weekend, and those of you who have pre-ordered, your books should have arrived or should arrive no later than Monday or Tuesday. And so with that said, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining the program, and I'll have some more stuff coming in the near future. So I appreciate your time. Y'all continue to be safe in these COVID streets. Continue to study and to love and support one another. So with that said, I will see y'all later. Peace.